Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So, I wanted to make a quick video about this issue to do with, humanity really, and, what I talk about, the Pursuit of Truth, about the system that we live within, that it limits humanity. By the system I live within, I mean, money, banks, borders around bits of land, the way we interact with each other as human beings, being circled up in boxes based on the bits of land that we're born into, and then having those allegiances and those grievances against other boxes, so that kind of thing, and that, wasting our time in things, like manufacturing a million different of the same things and not working together because of those boxes, and trying to keep that hierarchy, and us versus them, and kings versus peasants, all that kind of inequality, I would call it, of the humanity. Could be the title of this one. So what interested me about was to do with this ulez thing and the election, and what it was is that, the climate change, if, I don't know, because there's debate on whether climate change is just a natural pattern or whether it is something that humans are doing. It probably is something that humans are doing, because we all know that CO2 is not good for the humans in general. That's why there's lots more asthma and stuff like that since the Industrial Revolution. And, there's the ozone layer and all that kind of stuff in the 90s. So it is possible. Let's just say that if it is true, for the argument's sake, if it's true that we are destroying the planet by our actions, which are mostly based on this system of greed and competition. Some people want to limit how many times the cows burp and fart to try and solve a problem that mankind is creating, which is the cars and the factories and all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of that we wouldn't need if we were living a better system, a cleaner system, a humanity system, where we were just doing the things that we needed to do and not manufacturing a million different things and working against each other, all that kind of stuff. We wouldn't have as much of these emissions. But anyway, the argument is this. Imagine it's true that we're destroying the planet, and that our future generations may not have a planet, or may live in a planet where it's, it's not nice to live in. Well, it's already not nice to live in, but imagine how it would be if nature was against you as well as actual man is against you by creating these systems. And then this policy to do with ulez is to Sadiq Khan, MP of Lord Mayor of London. Is he Lord Mayor or just Mayor of London? I'm not sure. Anyway, so he wants to, car drivers to pay more money based on is it Uxbridge, or is it a different part of expansion of the M25 into outer London, I guess, to try and, I mean, personally, I don't agree with the idea of politicians like to do this. A problem that they've created, their system, they're the one in charge. The big businesses are the ones who've made all the money, and probably the big factories and all those big businesses are the ones that actually have caused majority of the CO2 emission problems. And rather than cutting them back, because they can't do that because that would risk economy, they want to get it from the little people to pay for it. So in that sense, I don't think that it's nice that a problem that people have to pay for, when it's big businesses who are making loads of billions of dollars out of polluting our world. See, that's another point of where it doesn't work, the system that we live in, because of that. So equality and justice isn't there, because the government has to protect economy, money, unnecessary things that don't really matter, don't really need to be in a place to do with humanity. But imagine that's the case, that the planet's being destroyed, and because Labour didn't win Uxbridge, it went back to the Tories. They think that's because of ulez, and so let's scrap that policy and let's just carry on, polluting, and free to pollute, because humans are like that. They're greedy and they're possessive and they're selfish because that's the way we've taught them. So they won't be thinking of the future, they'll be thinking of themselves, they'll be thinking of my pocket, my money and all that stuff, because that's unfortunately the way the system is. So we can't really blame people for thinking that way. But imagine then you're destroying the country, the world, and the future generations of their existence. So yeah, it just made me think about that. So this was the bit I was listening to in Sky News that made me have that thought.
The way to promote.
Let's find a bit somewhere here where they sort of talked about that idea of whether, you know, in a cost of living crisis it's right to be having these kinds of policies. And that's the problem, you see, because we're all tied down to money. That means that we won't be able to make the proper decisions that are beneficial for humanity. We have to make decisions that are beneficial within the system, which is all about money and keeping it and all that kind of thing, and keeping people in power.
People don't like paying more taxes.
Let's bring in...
Sorry?
Voters will protest because people don't like paying more taxes.
Let's bring in Jack Richardson there. Do you think that energy policies, green policies, are a vote winner, or do you think that there is a risk that actually, like we saw in Uxbridge, people could think, hang on a minute, I don't want to pay more for this?
So I think with any policy, if it's a bad policy, it will be a vote loser, and if it's a good policy, it will be a vote winner. The ulez expansion has clearly cost the Labour Party votes because it was maybe poorly communicated, poorly implemented. People saw it as an attack on people who couldn't afford to move out of their cars during the cost of living crisis. But if we zoom out just for a second, climate and energy and environmental policies have been a top 5 priority for voters in the UK for the past 5 years now, according to YouGov's policy tracker. Clearly, people do want to see action, but they want to see it in, as John was saying, positive pro-growth ways that will generate jobs. And we've seen that with the offshore wind boom over the past 10 years. We've seen that with the gigafactory in Devon. And we can see it with other policies like helping people to green their homes. If we move out of Uxbridge for just a moment as well, the Conservatives lost quite badly to two parties that have been really upping the pressure on environmental policy, particularly over river pollution and fossil fuels. So I'd just say...
Let's bring in John Mann again at this point, shall we? Sadiq Khan, London Mayor, has come out in the last hour or so to defend his ulez policy, to really row in behind it. How do you think the Labour leadership should react now?
I thought there needs to be some careful thought. It's not getting rid of green policies, it's how you implement them that's important. And there's a bigger picture here, because the government got its fingers slightly burnt with the idea that it was going to get everybody to suddenly move away from gas boilers. And I just use the example. When I went all over my constituency about 15 years ago, persuading people to take gas boilers rather than have coal fires, which they'd had their entire lives. And so you have to take people on board with you in doing it. And in particular, people who don't have a lot of money. It's very easy for people like me who can afford it to get the kind of car I've got. I've got a hybrid car, and I can afford that, and I've got one. That's a choice I've made. Not everyone's got that choice, and in many parts of the country, people are really struggling. Green economy and green policy can go with that, but it has to be configured in a way that doesn't lead to people being hit in the pocket when they can't afford it at a time they can't afford it. And therefore there needs to be a look at exactly how it works, because it's clearly a message there from Uxbridge. To ignore that message would be foolish.
Just one more for you, because obviously part of Labour's key policy offer is spending £28 billion a year on the Green Prosperity Plan. Admittedly not immediately, but they want to build up to that. At a time when people might be looking at their public services and thinking, wow, there needs to be investment there, do you think that's a policy that Labour should keep?
No, I don't think there'll be a lack of support for major investment in the energy of today and tomorrow. And so putting money into things like nuclear fusion, even more money than being put at the moment, I think is very sensible. I think the public will go with that. I think where there needs to be real micro attention is when you're asking people individually to make decisions that will cost them at a time when there's major crises for many families in terms of putting food on the table. And so I think how you configure these policies has to be carefully done. And, the way it was done with the Warm Front scheme in getting new heating systems into the homes of people who didn't have much money under the Blair government is quite a good model to be adopted by all the political parties. And it's Labour who's been hit a little bit by this now. I'd strongly recommend that Labour re-looks at how that was done and the principles behind it. People will go green, but don't get them to have to suffer by doing so financially when they can't afford to. Keep them with you.
Jack Richardson, I think what you'll see going forward, perhaps, is the Conservatives trying to get any glimmer of optimism they can through these results. They'll obviously be happy.
Right, so that's enough. But yeah, interesting points made. But it just shows you that people, this is why are we voting this system all the time? For a long time, Westerners have had it easy. When you talk about the system, because the system mostly disenfranchises other countries, poorer countries, who are there to supply, based on the system. No, I'm not saying this, that lots of people outsource and use other countries' people to do the work for them so that they can manufacture things at cheaper cost. We know that happens with lots of manufacturers. But now the system, the people of the West are feeling, because of the war in Ukraine, COVID and etc., oil and gas prices, and of the suffering that people in the poor countries experience daily and have died of lack of food and warmth and all that kind of stuff. The system doesn't work for anyone, for any human being. This system where, imagine the place that we found ourselves on freely has enough food for every single individual. If it's transported, if it's, all managed and all that kind of stuff. But once you put a price tag on it, once you attach it to money, then it's not. And so people are unnecessarily suffering. That's, if you've made a system, it's got a major fault in it. And that's just one. There's thousands of these faults in the system that's connected to money, and the system that we work on now, and seeing, bits of land as ours. That we're not just temporarily here, because we can't never own it. We're temporarily, all of us, here. And so temporarily we should all exist with each other in a humane way, a harmony, so that we can all benefit from that. How silly of us not to. Anyway, that's my point. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.